It was early spring when the two pink lines stared back at me. The air still carried a bite of winter, but my skin was warm with panic. I sat alone in the tiny bathroom of our house, the test trembling in my hand. My mind raced, my heart pounded, and in that single, silent moment, the world shrank to a deafening stillness. I had always been the good daughter, the straight, a student, the Sunday choir girl. The quiet, obedient child of Margaret and Richard Barnes. The kind of parents who cared more about appearances than affection. My life was rules and routines, piano lessons and family dinners where silence filled the spaces love should have lived. Telling them was not bravery, it was necessity. I couldn't hide it forever. They sat across from me at the kitchen table, the late afternoon sun slanting through the blinds, casting long shadows across their rigid faces. My hands trembled in my lap, my mouth was dry, my voice barely above a whisper, "I'm pregnant." For a heartbeat, the silence remained. Then my father's fist slammed the table. My mother gasped as if I just murdered someone. "What did you say?" My father barked. I didn't mean for it to happen, but he roared. "Who is the father?" "It doesn't matter," he left. My mother looked at me like I was filth. "You've brought shame into this house. You've ruined your future for what, Lust?" I tried to speak, to explain that I still wanted to go to college, to work hard, to raise this child with everything I had. But it was useless. They had already decided. In their eyes I was a stain, an embarrassment. That night, they packed my clothes into black trash bags and left them by the front door. My father didn't look at me when he handed me a $100 bill. "That's all you'll get from us," he said coldly. "You made your choice, now live with it." My mother stood behind him, arms crossed, lips pressed so tightly they were white. "You are no longer our daughter." And just like that, the door closed. I walked the streets for hours, dazed. The April wind cut through my thin sweater. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. I ended up in a 24-hour diner, ordering a coffee I couldn't stomach. I sat in that booth until dawn, staring out the window as the world moved on without me. The following weeks were a blur of shelter beds, social workers, and rejection. I learned quickly that pregnancy was a burden few people wanted to help carry. Friends I once trusted stopped answering my calls. Teachers looked at me with pity. I became invisible and judged all at once. But something else grew inside me, stronger than fear, love. Each time I felt my baby flutter, I remembered why I had to survive. He was a part of me. He was mine. He was the only family I had left. I named him Noah before he was even born. A name that felt like safety. Like hope, I promised him, whispered through tears in the quiet of shelter rooms and bus rides, that I would never abandon him the way I was abandoned. That he would know love, not shame. That I would be enough for him. By the time I was 8 months pregnant, I had found a small job cleaning motel rooms during the night shift. It was grueling work, but it gave me a place to stay. An old maintenance closet converted into a sleeping nook by the kind-hearted manager, Carla, who saw something in me no one else did. "You've got fire, girl," she said one night, handing me a sandwich from the break room. "Don't let the world snuff it out." Noah was born in the middle of a thunderstorm, in a city hospital, with flickering lights and peeling paint. I screamed into a pillow, clutching the hand of a nurse named Terry, who told me I was stronger than most women twice my age. When they laid him on my chest, all the fear melted. He was beautiful, perfect. A tiny, wrinkled miracle, with a shock of dark hair and curious eyes that blinked up at me like I was his entire universe. And the months that followed were the hardest of my life. I worked whenever I could, cleaning, folding laundry, handing out flyers. I lived on instant noodles and free clinic visits. Every spare dollar went to diapers or formula. There were nights I went hungry so Noah wouldn't. But even in those dark times, there was light. Noah smiled for the first time at 3 months. His laughter came easy. His little fingers curled around mine like a promise. I read him bedtime stories in motel beds, sang lullabies off key in laundromats. I watched him grow, one miracle day at a time. No one clapped for my sacrifices. There were no proud grandparents, no birthday cards, no family support. Just me and my son. I remember walking past my parents' neighborhood, once when Noah was almost a year old. Their yard was perfectly trimmed. Their curtains were drawn. From the sidewalk, I could see the edge of the grand piano I used to play every evening. I stood there for a long time holding Noah on my hip, wondering if they ever thought about us, if they regretted it. Then I turned away. They had closed the door. I was done knocking. People talk about rock bottom like it's a place you reach and escape from. But for me, it was a slow climb up from a hole no one else even saw. But each step I took, with Noah in my arms, was a defiance. I enrolled in night classes while he slept beside me in a carrier. I took community college courses, worked my way through business school over 7 long years. I never gave up. Because I couldn't, he needed me, and truth be told, I needed him even more, because when the world called me worthless, Noah looked at me like I hung the moon. When the weight of it all felt too much, his giggle made it bearable. He didn't care that I didn't have a big house or a last name anyone respected. He just needed love, and that I had in abundance. By the time he was 10, Noah began humming tunes in his sleep. By 12, he was writing lyrics on the back of receipts. I bought him a second-hand guitar with my tax refund and watched as his small fingers coaxed melodies from its worn strings. He was gifted undeniably, but more than that, he had a heart that felt deeply, just like his mother. I may have been 17 and shattered when they cast me out, but piece by piece, I rebuilt a life they never believed I could have. And little did they know the child they rejected would one day become the star they tried to claim. But not yet. That part of the story that comes later. People think survival is about dramatic moments rushing into burning buildings or fighting off wolves in the woods. But I learned that survival is much quieter. It's working 2 jobs while your feet bleed just to afford your son's asthma medication. It's going without a coat in January so he can have one. It's staying awake through exhaustion to finish coursework because you refuse to be stuck in the same cycle forever. I didn't just want to survive, I wanted to rise, and I did, slowly, bruised, but not broken. Noah was 3 when I earned my GED. He clapped when I walked across that tiny stage at the community center, not really understanding what it meant, but beaming like I had just won the Nobel Prize. "Mom is so smart," he shouted, waving his little plastic dinosaur in the air. People laughed, I cried. At 5, he started kindergarten. I walked him to school every morning before heading to class myself. Some days, I'd sit on a park bench with my textbooks and study until it was time to pick him up. Other days, I cleaned houses or served at diners just to keep the lights on. My 20s were not glamorous. They were filled with chipped nails, missed meals, and textbooks stained with coffee and formula. I didn't date, I didn't party, I didn't have the luxury of making mistakes, but I had purpose. Everything I did for Noah. By the time I finished my associate's degree in business, I'd already started building something of my own. A small cleaning service, just me and 2 other women I'd met through the shelters. We called it Second Chance Services. It wasn't much at first. A few apartments, then a couple of office buildings, but it grew. Word spread about how thorough we were, how reliable. Eventually, I was managing a team of 7. It wasn't millions, but it was enough. Enough to move into a 2-bedroom rental in a quiet part of the city. Enough to afford groceries without counting pennies. Enough for Noah to have music lessons. I remember the day we moved into that apartment. Noah was 8. He ran from room to room yelling, "We have a bathtub. Mom, we have a real bathtub." I stood in the kitchen, hands shaking, staring at the keys in my palm. We had made it. Noah never once asked why he didn't have grandparents. I think deep down he knew. He used to ask why I worked so much, why I always looked tired. I told him the truth always, that love sometimes looks like sweat and sacrifice. That family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up. And I showed up, every school concert, every scraped knee, every nightmare, every science fair, every hard question. I never missed a moment, because I had already known the pain of being left behind. I wouldn't let him feel it too. His love for music only deepened with age. By 11, he was writing songs that gave me goosebumps. By 13, he had learned piano through online videos and could play anything by ear. His voice changed early, deep, rich, soulful. He started uploading covers to YouTube. Within a year, his videos were pulling in thousands of views. He called it just a hobby. I knew better. I'd watch him from the hallway, strumming that old guitar or sitting at the keyboard, eyes closed, completely lost in the sound. "You have something, Noah," I said once, something rare. He looked at me with all the wisdom of a 14-year-old. "I got it from you." I laughed. "I can barely hum in tune." "Not music," he said, strength. That night I cried in the shower. Because for the first time in a long time, I believed I had given him something good. His rise wasn't overnight. It was late nights editing videos, writing songs between homework, auditioning for tiny talent shows in mall food courts. I drove him to every one, sat in every crowd, held his hand every time. At 16, he entered an online music competition judged by industry professionals. One of his original songs, Paper Cranes, written about a single mom raising a child in a motel room, went viral. Within a week, he was getting calls from producers. Within a month, he had a record deal. Noah didn't just become famous, he became beloved. There was something raw and real in his music. His lyrics spoke of loneliness, hope, pain, resilience. He never changed his story, never hid where he came from. In every interview, he talked about "my mom, Leah, the strongest person I know." Our lives transformed almost overnight. We moved out of our modest apartment into a house, our first home. I still remember the keys pressing into my palm, just like the first time. But now I didn't cry from fear. I cried from gratitude. The guest room I decorated with soft yellow paint was meant for just in case, a future, a family. Not for the past, but the past has a way of knocking on the door just when you stop expecting it. It started with a voicemail from an unknown number. "This is Margaret Barnes. I heard about Noah. We'd love to reconnect." I froze. It had been nearly 29 years. They hadn't called when I was homeless, when I gave birth, when I graduated, when I started my business, when Noah released his first album. But now that he was on magazine covers, trending worldwide, now suddenly they were family again. I didn't call back, not at first, but then I saw them, front row at Noah's Soul Doubt concert in our hometown. Smiling, clapping, cameras caught them during the standing ovation. The media ran headlines like, "Proud grandparents attend Rising Stars show, family reunited through music." I felt sick. They hadn't reunited with anyone. They were riding the coattails of a boy they abandoned before he was even born. The world didn't know the truth, but they would, not through anger, through the kind of revenge that doesn't scream, but stings. The kind that speaks only when the whole world is listening. There they were, dressed to perfection, smiling like saints, sitting in the front row at Madison Hall, as if they belonged there. Margaret and Richard Barnes, my parents, my ghosts applauding wildly as my son, Noah, walked onto the stage to a roar of screaming fans. I couldn't breathe. I had seen them once or twice over the years across a grocery store aisle, in a community event photo, but never like this. Never so bold, never so entitled. It was as if the years hadn't passed, as if they hadn't slammed the door in my face when I was 17 and pregnant, as if they hadn't left me crying on the street with a garbage bag full of clothes and $100 bill to survive on. And now here they were, beaming in the spotlight of his success, my son, the boy they never wanted. I sat frozen in the back row of the VIP section, my hands clenched in my lap. Noah's voice echoed through the hall. His song, Shelter, written for me, swept over the crowd like wind across tall grass, a raw, beautiful sound. His lyrics told our story, the nights we had nothing, the way love kept us alive, and they were smiling. Like they had anything to do with it. After the show, Noah was buzzing energy pulsing through his limbs like electricity. Fans swarmed the lobby, reporters lined up backstage. I stayed close but out of frame. I was never the spotlight kind. I had lived in shadows for too long to crave its glare, until I heard someone say, "Oh my God, no. Us grandparents are here. Look, they came all the way from Virginia." My stomach dropped. I turned, and there they were, standing near the press table, arms around each other, telling some journalist how proud they were, how they always knew he'd be special. Margaret even dabbed her eyes for the cameras. I felt like I was watching strangers play roles in a script I hadn't written. Noah caught sight of them too. At first, he didn't react, just stared, jaw slightly open. Then something cold and calculating settled in his eyes. He walked toward them. I tried to reach him, to stop him, but he held up his hand. "I've got it, Mom," he said quietly. "Trust me, hi," he said, smiling like he'd just run into distant acquaintances. Margaret lit up. "Oh, Noah, you were incredible tonight, absolutely breathtaking." Richard extended a hand. "You've really made us proud, son. Noah repeated, his smile unchanged. "That's funny. You're not my parents," Margaret faltered. "Well, no, but we're your grandparents, your mother's parents. Surely she told you." "Oh, she told me," he said, voice sharper now. "She told me how you kicked her out when she needed you most, how you left her to raise me alone, how you turned your backs for nearly 30 years. A few reporters turned their heads, cameras quietly shifting direction. We made a mistake," Margaret said quickly, voice brittle. "We were trying to protect her. We didn't know how hard things were for her." "Yes, you did," Noah interrupted. "You knew and you didn't care." He stepped closer. His voice lowered, but the fury behind it didn't. "You don't get to show up now. You don't get to play proud grandparents because I'm on TV. You weren't there when my mom cried herself to sleep. You weren't there when she skipped meals so I could eat. You weren't there when we had nothing." Margaret's eyes were glassy now. Richard looked stunned. "I don't need a damn photo op," Noah said. "I already have a family. Her name is Leah. She raised me, loved me, sacrificed everything for me. You're just strangers in good clothing." Then with perfect calm, he turned and walked away. The video went viral within hours. Someone had caught it on their phone and uploaded it with the caption, "Noah shuts down fake grandparents trying to claim his fame. Absolute legend." The comments poured in. People rallied around him, around us, and suddenly, the truth wasn't just ours anymore. It belonged to the world. Talk shows reached out, so did magazines. They wanted our story, not the sugar-coated, neatly packaged version, but the real one. Noah asked me first, "Mom, do you want to tell them, or do you want me to?" I hesitated. My instinct was to stay quiet. I had spent decades keeping my pain behind polite smiles and soft refusals. But then I thought about every girl like me, every teenager who had been thrown away, who had suffered in silence, who was told she was unworthy because she made one mistake. I looked him in the eyes. Let's tell it together. The interview aired the following week. Just me and Noah, sitting side by side in a studio bathed in warm light. He held my hand the whole time. I told them everything. How I was 17 when I got pregnant. How my parents disowned me. How I lived in a shelter, worked low, paying jobs, and went to night school with a baby strapped to my chest. How I built a life brick by brick with no blueprint and no help. Noah added his truth too, how I never gave up. How he never missed a meal even when I did. How his music was born from my resilience. How his success was our survival song. I thought it would hurt to say it out loud. Instead, it felt like exhaling after holding my breath for 29 years. The world listened. People flooded our inboxes with messages. Girls who had been cast out by their families. Single moms who saw themselves in me. Sons who realized the quiet strength of their mothers. And then, in the wake of the truth came silence. From Margaret and Richard, no more calls, no more interviews, no more appearances in the crowd. They had finally been seen for who they were, not victims, not heroes, not grieving elders desperate to reconnect, but opportunists who abandoned their daughter and came crawling back when the cameras rolled, and now the cameras were no longer on them. No, his next concert sold out in minutes. Before the encore, he paused in the middle of the stage, the stadium lights dimmed. "I want to dedicate this next song to someone who saved me before I ever picked up a guitar. To the woman who taught me what real love looks like. A spotlight found me in the front row." My breath caught. "This is for my mom," he said, "for every sacrifice, for every sleepless night, for every time she stayed when others walked away." He played Oxygen, a song he wrote just for me. And I wept, not from sadness, not even from joy, but from release. The weight of decades fell off my shoulders in waves. They disowned me when I was 17 and pregnant, but I didn't just survive. I raised a boy who became a man who knew the worth of a woman's love. And when the people who threw me away came back for a piece of his spotlight, we made sure they were left standing in the dark. It can turn strangers into family and family into strangers. Noah was everywhere now: billboards, magazine covers, soul, out tours. People stopped him in airports, cried at his meet, and greets, tattooed his lyrics on their skin. And still, every night when he came home, he kissed me on the cheek and asked if I'd eaten. That never changed. What did change was the spotlight. It no longer belonged only to him. It found me too. After the interview, people wanted to hear more. Not just about my pain, but about my power. About how a 17-year-old girl, thrown away by her family and the world, raised a son who changed both. At first, I wasn't sure how to hold the attention. I'd spent most of my life behind curtains, cleaning, planning, building, surviving. But then I realized I wasn't in the shadows anymore. I had earned the light. A publishing house reached out, offering a book deal. They wanted my story, from pregnancy to disownment to becoming the mother of a global icon. I hesitated. Not because I didn't have the words, but because part of me still felt like I needed permission to speak. Then I remembered the girl I was at 17. Scared, alone, silenced, I wrote the book for her. Unwanted, a story of survival, silence, and a mother's love. Hit the bestseller list within weeks. Book tours followed, podcast interviews, college lectures, women's shelters invited me to speak. I told my story again and again, not as a victim, but as proof that broken beginnings don't mean broken endings. And still, I never spoke in hatred. Even when asked about my parents, what would you say to them now? One journalist asked gently. I paused. I would say that the girl you left behind survived, and the woman she became doesn't need your apology to heal. It wasn't sweet revenge. It was deeper, it was peace. Noah's music evolved too. His second album, Roots, was a love letter to our journey. It told stories of late buses and cold nights, shared laughter in the dark, and dreams written in spiral notebooks. The centerpiece song was titled Leah, just my name, no metaphor, no embellishment, just the truth of me. He performed it live for the first time at the Global Music Awards. The audience held their breath. He sat alone at the piano, no dancers, no lights, just his voice, low and aching, and lyrics that made even the coldest hearts ache. She made a world from nothing / fed me dreams when she went hungry / love like hers. Don't come from blood / it comes from staying / it comes from scars. The camera found me in the crowd. And this time I didn't cry, I smiled, because I wasn't ashamed of the pain anymore. It had shaped everything beautiful in my life. Margaret and Richard disappeared from the public eye. After Noah's onstage confrontation and the interview fallout, they became the cautionary tale in tabloids, grandparents who chose reputation over love. They never apologized, not publicly, not privately, but I stopped expecting them to. Some people can't look at what they destroyed. It's easier to pretend they were never the ones holding the match, but I didn't need their apology. Because Noah was my vindication, my life was my revenge, and not the bitter, dramatic kind. It was the sweet kind. The kind that comes when you rise so far beyond the version of yourself they tried to bury that they couldn't touch you even if they tried. Noah bought me a house on my 47th birthday. Not a mansion, not flashy, just a cottage by the sea with a wraparound porch and a garden that blooms in the spring. He said, "You always talked about the ocean. I figured you deserved to wake up to it." I stood in that doorway, holding the keys, not shaking this time, but steady. I had come full circle. The door that was slammed on me at 17 had been replaced with one that would always stay open. For friends, for women like me, for the girl I once was. Now sometimes I sit on that porch with a cup of tea and watch the sun dip below the water. The phone buzzes with emails, invitations, letters from women across the world. I reply to everyone, because I know what it's like to feel alone. But I also know what it's like to rise anyway. And that's the story I want to leave behind, not the betrayal, not the shame, but the healing, the rising. The choosing of love over bitterness. The truth that family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shares your burdens. So yes, they disowned me when I was 17 and pregnant, and 29 years later, they came crawling back to stand in my son's fame. But by then, we had already built something brighter than they could ever claim. And in the end, while they reached for a spotlight that never belonged to them, I stood in the glow of something far more powerful,